execution?
I don't recall any such thing. I think we may have mentioned sometime in council meetings that we needed to support our farmers more. But remember, she is out of the county. She is not qualified, so why would I have discussed her?
Well, I know you wanted to tell me about all that, but the real question I wanted to know was whether you participated in the process that led up to the original PAC contract's execution. And I understand you to say no. Is that fair?
Yes. I had no knowledge of her being brought into the county as a consultant until I saw those notations, and then I began my inquiry.
Now, at some point, that PAC contract was amended, was it not?
I am not aware.
There was a second contract that Mr. Preston executed with Allison Schoen, is that correct?
Now, are you referring to what we now know as the contract that was anteed up, the one right before the buyout?
The second contract. There were two contracts. There was the first one.
See, I wasn't able to get material until way after the fact. So no, I didn't know at the time, but I knew it after the fact.
Okay, and when you say after the fact, do you mean after the severance agreement was executed?
I did not become aware of a new contract, I don't think, until probably January. I may have learned about it in December, but I was not aware of it in that timeline. I was kept out of the loop, Mr. Davis.
I know you want to tell me about that, but what I want to know are the questions I asked you. We just need to be careful for purposes of the record. When you say December or January, I think I know what you mean. But just for purposes of the record, you mean December of 2008 or January of 2009?
It would have been in that timeline. It would have been after the severance agreement that was brought up in the November 18th meeting. I had no knowledge that she got an anteed-up contract.
Is it fair to say that you don't have any first-hand information about the facts or circumstances surrounding the execution of that second PAC contract?
Not until afterwards. I was questioning the first one. I really thought it was absolutely inappropriate for a councilman's daughter living out of the country with no prior work or education experience to be given such a contract. That was totally bizarre.
Now, Ms. Wilson, I will you what? We are going to have a deal. I'm going to let you say whatever you want to say on the record. I don't have a problem with that. But if you have these extended statements that aren't really a response to my question, it's going to take us a lot longer today. And I just want to tell you now in the morning, and that's fine with me. I've got all day. You know that I have to leave at 3 to 3:30 because I have other responsibilities. I'll be glad to come back. But we may have to at our current rate of speed.
Perhaps if you asked the questions in a better way for me to understand them, I would be less wordy. You seem to elicit...
I'm sure that it is my inartful questions that are prompting the issue, so I'll try harder. Now, in relation to Heather Jones, do you know who Heather Jones is?
Yes.
Was Heather Jones the Director of Economic Development for Anderson County?
Yes.
There are allegations in the lawsuit about Heather Jones. Do you understand that?
I don't know the contents of the lawsuit, Mr. Davis, but I do know there were allegations about Miss Jones.
And if you don't know the content of the lawsuit, that's fine. That's basically all I'm trying to get through. So do you have any first-hand information with respect to the allegations pertaining to Heather Jones in this lawsuit?
I'm not familiar with the lawsuit. I can just tell you that in looking at the GLR 110, it appears she got paid twice for a trip to China. And I did raise those questions. I can't remember details other than that.
Okay, do you know or have any first-hand information about memoranda relating to Heather Jones' SUV usage?
No, I have heard that allegation, but I don't know firsthand.
And that's all I'm trying to find out is, you weren't there when they executed a memorandum about her SUV, were you?
If you're referring to anything that went on in Mr. Preston's office, no, I would not have been.
Is the same thing true in relation to educational reimbursements relating to Heather Jones?
No, I wouldn't know.
And with respect to the reimbursements let me rephrase. With respect to a memorandum pertaining to potential travel to Germany by Heather Jones, is that the same thing for that memorandum as well?
No, we had no knowledge beforehand.
In relation to the lawsuit, are you familiar with allegations pertaining to Michael Thompson?
I did not know them beforehand, except that I heard rumors that Maccabee and Thompson were going to be given county jobs. There were rumors about that after they lost their primary.
And in fact, did you not propose an ordinance that would prohibit council members from taking county employment subsequent to rotating off council?
I did that as a result of hearing those rumors, and it mirrored the General Assembly measures.
At the time when you proposed that ordinance, had you received information that Michael Thompson may have interest in working for Anderson County?
I had heard rumors.
And where did you hear those rumors?
I don't even remember. There was a lot swirling around.
Well, the information had to be colorful enough to prompt you to propose an ordinance, would it not?
No. At that point, rumors were sufficient.
To propose new laws?
Yes, especially when we wanted to be more professional and more clear in our policies in the county.
At some point, did the rumor-based legislating stop?
I don't even understand what you're talking about.
That's okay. We'll keep going. Were you a party to any conversation between Mr. Preston and Michael Thompson in relation to Mr. Thompson's potential employment with Anderson County?
No.
Were you copied on any correspondence about potential?
No.
Just let me finish the question. I was going to say, were you copied on any correspondence regarding potential employment with the county by Mr. Thompson?
No.
Did you witness any conversation between Mr. Preston and Mr. Thompson about Mr. Thompson's potential employment with Anderson County?
No.
Who is Bill McAfee?
Council representative for District 7, former councilman.
There have been issues raised about travel reimbursements that Mr. McAfee received inside of this lawsuit. Were you familiar with Mr. McAfee's travel while he was on council?
I can't remember the timeline, but I think in the fall of '08, probably during that time span, I was looking at the GLR 110s and I saw significant amounts of money that seemed to be paid for his and his business associates' travel.
Now, when you reference the GLR 110, has the GLR 110 been something that you have reviewed on a regular basis for some time?
Whenever I could get them. That's part of why I went to Columbia to get those financial records opened. They came to me sporadically. It's a weekly printout typically. I think they told us about it every Wednesday. I first learned about them, I guess back in 2002. They were going to Mike Holden. He was the former council representative for District 5, so I asked to be copied likewise. And then they started, it was kind of amusing. I do remember this. I was picking them up because Mr. Holden didn't pick his up. So I substituted myself, I guess. And I started seeing interesting things, and I would ask about it. And then when he found out where I was getting it, then I had a hard time getting them. That's what happened there.
When, in the fall of 2008, did you first have concerns about Mr. McAfee's travel?
It probably would have been around September. I had begun to see the credit card. Let's see. There were 23 credit cards, and they would show up in the GLR 110, and it would say, I think, First Citizens, but it would be a different number.
Would it be fair to say that at the time of the severance agreement, you believed that the county had a contract with Allison Schoen? You just didn't know it had an amended contract with Allison Schoen?
No. Once I found out about the first one, I strongly objected.
I understand that, but you knew that the first one was in effect back in October of 2007, right?
I didn't know there was a contract until afterwards. I don't believe. I just saw the notations in the GLR 110s, and I was curious about what Palmetto Agricultural Consulting was. And it was being paid out of council funds, and that's what I most objected to. I was trying to get some funds from my district for some of the fire departments, and I was told there was some money left, and that's what drew my attention.
Out of the funds that were earmarked for special projects?
And matching grant funds.
What I'm trying to understand is, back in the fall of 2007, you learned that Palmetto Agricultural Consultants was receiving checks from the county, right?
Yes.
And what we know is that those checks continued through 2007. So had you reviewed the GLR 110 intermittently through 2007, you would continue to see the payment to Palmetto Agricultural.
Yes, and they continued through 2008.
And did the administrative reports contain briefings about the work that Palmetto Agricultural Consultants was doing?
They may have.
Were those administrative reports included in your agenda being packets?
Some of them, yes.
So coming into the fall of 2008, is it fair to say that you knew that there was some sort of relationship between the county and PAC, but you may not have known that there was an amendment to that contract in the beginning of November?
The very first contract would have been highly objectionable because it was a councilman whose daughter lived out of the county, had no expertise in the area, and she is being given large amounts of money. And during that time, we did come to know that Mr. Wilson and his daughter and family were engaged in a farm together. They worked together.
Now, respectfully, I'll let you explain your answer to my question however you'd like. But you have to answer the question first, and then you can explain. And the question I asked was, coming into the fall of 2008, you understood that there was some sort of relationship between the county and PAC. But at the time of the severance agreement, you just didn't know there was an amendment to the contract between the county and PAC.
No.
No, that's incorrect, or that is correct?
Your questions are very Byzantine here. I did not know there had been a newer contract that was for a greater amount of money, because the first one was totally ridiculous.
At the time when the severance agreement vote occurred on November 18, 2008, were you under the impression that the contract with the county and PAC still existed, the original contract?
I would guess.
Have you ever reviewed that second PAC contract?
I think I skimmed over it.
What about the second PAC contract did you find so objectionable?
I think it went from like $65 to $95 an hour for 3 years. The first one was year to year, I think. The second one was a 3-year contract.
And that's the basis for your objection?
I've already given you my objections. No councilman should have a child getting funds when they are already business partners, and that material is not qualified. And that person is not qualified. We can get the same material and better from the Clemson Extension Service, Clemson University, and the heads of sustainable agriculture at Clemson. Why should we pay a person out of the county unless it's the daughter of a councilman? That's how I see it, and I think that's how most of the public sees it.
I inadvertently skipped over some of the background information I meant to ask you. Are you married?
No.
What was your mom's name?
Mary Elizabeth Rogers Wilson.
And what was your dad's name?
Edward Wilson. Edward Carlton Wilson, Jr.
And did your mother have siblings?
One sister, Celeste Rogers Fuller.
And did your dad have siblings?
You might need a bibliography for that. He had 6 brothers and 1 sister.
Holy smacks, you remember their names?
Yes, Michael Charles, he passed away recently. My father, of course. My Uncle Sidney, my Uncles Wallace and Willis, who were twins. My Uncle Kyle, my Uncle Wayne, and my Aunt Nancy.
How about your educational background? Where did you go to college?
I finished at USC.
What year?
72.
What degree?
Bachelor of Fine Arts.
Where did you start?
I started at Columbia College.
Columbia College is where?
You must not be from South Carolina, from Columbia.
Well, there is actually, in my defense, there are actually several Columbia colleges, so I just want to make sure we were...
It wasn't Columbia University.
I believe there's a Columbia College in West Virginia, too.
Okay.
How about your work history? What jobs did you have?
Well, from being a youngster through the first couple of years out of college, I was heavily involved with the farm, still am, but I literally ran the farm for a couple of years. We had a breeding operation. We had brood mares, young stock, horses in training, boarders, etc. And then I think I got my real estate license in 74 maybe. I married in 76.
Who did you marry in 1976?
Jeff Lenar.
Can you spell that for me?
Lenar.
And I don't know how to ask this gracefully, but were you divorced or did Mr. Lenar pass away?
No, we were divorced. We had been at Carolina together, and he finished Carolina Law School. He took a job in Pennsylvania, Quaker State Oil Refining Corporation. He was the corporate attorney for them, and we moved there, and I was there for about a year and a half.
Where did you live?
Oil City, Ohio. It was, I think, Venango County, a very interesting place.
Out by Titusville.
Oh, you're familiar with Titusville? Yeah.
I know a little bit about Pennsylvania.
Are you from Pennsylvania?
I am.
What part?
The Pocono Mountains, the exact opposite end of the state.
Well, I discovered Mr. Bright was from Clarion, I think. No, I think he was from Warren or Bradford.
What year were you divorced from Mr. Lenar?
I think it was 78.
Where was that divorce filed?
I came home and filed it in Anderson County.
What were the grounds?
I think it was considered irreconcilable differences.
After you came home, what did you do?
I went back to farm work and real estate.
And were you working on your own with real estate, or were you working with a shop?
I think my license was first with Carolina Flashman. We did commercial real estate work, and then Ann Griffin, and then Falconbury Forestry Company, And then after that, I was on my own. I married my former competitor over in Georgia, Royce Lawrence, and I moved to Georgia in '83, worked with him. I'm not sure how you would term it legally, but I had my real estate brokerage licenses continuously in South Carolina, Georgia, and I worked with him. And when I came back home through divorce, I went back on my own.
I'd like to turn your attention to the employment claim that Mr. Preston raised that gave rise to the severance agreement. Do you recall what that claim was?
Are you referring to what led up to November 18th?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
He had an attorney send a letter claiming anticipatory breach of his contract, but the way I read it, I didn't get it until 10 days after he had sent it to others. So it looked to me like he had resigned or something. It didn't make sense.
Did you also understand that Mr. Preston was saying that he had tort claims against both you and Mr. Walter?
I'm not following your line of thought here.
You referenced anticipatory breach claims, so we've talked about that. What I'm asking you is, did you at some point learn or become aware of the fact that not only was Mr. Preston saying he was raising anticipatory breach claims, but he was also raising tort claims against you individually and Mr. Walter individually?
I can't remember if that was in the letter. I don't remember, but I do know that I think it was September of '08. He sued Mr. Waldrop and me over an incident where we took Channel 7 News people in with us to ask to look at the credit card statements, and he claimed that we were interfering with his ability to run the county. Ironically, I didn't say anything. I let Bob do the talking. He just asked to look at credit card statements, but I got sued anyway.
We'll talk about that in a second, but let's look at a few documents and maybe this will help you out.
Okay.
Is this the letter that you received where you first learned that Mr. Preston was raising claims against Anderson County?
I think the first I learned of it was not the letter. I think it came up in council. We had an executive session to hire an attorney, but I had not received the letter. I don't believe until that night or later. It says by hand delivery, but it was never delivered to me, Mr. Davis. I had to get a copy of it. I'm not sure where I got it, but it was many days after the September 25th date.
Ms. Wilson, what address does it reflect that the hand delivery was named to?
South Main Street.
And is that where the Anderson County Council is located?
Yes.
And does the letter reflect the same address for delivery for all 7 council members?
It does.
And when is this piece of correspondence dated?
September 25th, 2008.
Stamped confidential?
Yes.
Do you recall Bob Walter providing this letter to the media?
No, I don't.
In this letter, about halfway down the middle of the paragraph, there's a sentence that states, and I quote, "Certain council members have hindered Mr. Preston's ability to perform his duties as county administrator for at least 7 years now," end quote. And the question...
I'm trying to find where you're talking about.
Let me help you, right there.
Okay, so I guess he was referring to me then.
That's what I was going to ask you, so we can skip that question. Now,
if you're referring to interference being asking questions and seeking finance records, that may be what he's referring to, because I never made a trip into his office. I was never invited to his office. In fact, I was afraid to go to the courthouse by myself.
okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. I wasn't inferring anything. I was just asking a question of whether the certain council members he was referring to were understood generally to be you and Mr. Walter. That's correct, right?
I don't know. I just know that I was considered his enemy by him, which is a most unfortunate thing because I was not.
Shortly after the county council received Exhibit 1, which is the letter dated September 25th of 2000, do you recall council hiring Tom Bright?
Yes, but please bear in mind I did not get this letter until later, and I don't remember specifically when, but it was, well, after the date. A lot of material went to other council members that didn't come to me. I didn't get this until later.
Is there anything else?
That's all I can tell you. And I do know that we did hire Tom Bright in the executive session. I counseled that we should slow down and have an opportunity as council members individually to look at the names.
Council, I just want to make sure that she's talking about what they were talking about in executive session, so I don't want to.
I don't see what that has any bearing. The problem we had is we would go into the meeting and we were given the curriculum vitae, I guess, of several attorneys. I don't even remember their names. I didn't have time to check and see who I would suggest, so that's all I can tell you. I counseled that we have an opportunity to do our homework before we make a vote.
Okay, all I wanted to know was, do you remember when County Council hired Tom Bright? So apparently your answer is yes.
I think it was that meeting. I don't remember a date, and I don't even remember, but I probably abstained or voted against. I don't remember.
At some point after the meeting where they hired Tom Bright, did Tom Bright call you on the phone?
I think he may have. I can't remember if that was before or after the ad hoc personnel committee met over in Powdersville. I don't remember the timeline in that, but I'm sure I talked with him at some point.
Let me show you what we'll mark as Exhibit 2. Ms. Wilson, what I'm going to represent to you is that these are as the handwritten notes from Mr. Bright that he confirmed yesterday was his notes from his telephone conversation with you. And I know you didn't write those notes, but I just wanted to ask you questions about Mr. Bright wrote.
That's why I'm reading them. Some of the writing I can't read, okay?
The first question I would like to ask you is, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a date of October 13th of 2008.
Okay.
Is that generally consistent with what you remember about the time frame in which Mr. Bright called you?
Probably.
If you go down, and I'm going to call these paragraphs, I know they're not really paragraphs, but don't know what else to call them, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a sentence that begins, quote, she urges temperance, quote. Do you see that?
Uh-huh.
Were you urging temperance in discussion?
I usually do.
And then the next sentence says, quote, the lame ducks want to buy out the administrator, put new administrator in place, quote. Do you recall on or about October 13th of 2008 communicating to Tom Bright that the lame ducks wanted to buy out the administrator and put in a new administrator?
That's what we're hearing.
Who were you hearing that from?
There were all kinds of rumors all over during that time. And I can't remember if this was before or after the Powdersville meeting where Bob and I sat in the ad hoc committee meeting. But by then I had the letter that you've just shown me, and that's what we were believing they were trying to do. And there was already some research that indicated that there should not be a buyout.
What research was that?
I think it's referred to as Piedmont versus Cowart, and that's where you don't bind the incoming council's hands with dictates from the previous. That was my understanding.
Was the exception to Piedmont versus Cowart ever explained to you?
I don't know. I don't remember.